a book in hand. Aisha Williams is blindsided by cops in Riverside Park, her peace torn apart by suspicion. From a park bench to a judge's gavel, her battle electrifies Asheville. Can one woman's courage spark a revolution? Dive into the drama. The afternoon in Asheville, North Carolina, was draped in a soft golden sunlight, as if the entire world were whispering an invitation to peace. Riverside Park buzzed with life, the sound of children's laughter echoing by the shimmering river, the steady rhythm of running shoes on the winding paths, and the gentle murmur of families spreading picnic blankets under the shade of towering maple trees, their leaves blazing red like autumn flames. Amid this scene, Aisha Williams, a 32-year-old black lawyer, sat on a wooden bench by the riverbank. A thick novel rested on her lap, its pages fluttering lightly in the gentle breeze. For Aisha, this was a rare moment to escape the long, stressful days in the courtroom, where she fought tirelessly for justice. Aisha took a deep breath, the scent of fresh grass and damp earth soothing her heart. Her deep brown eyes glided over the lines of text, her mind sinking into the world of the characters on the page. A faint smile curved her lips, a sense of freedom stirring in her chest, a feeling she seldom found amid the stacks of case files and the scrutinizing gazes of the courtroom. Here, she was just Aisha, not Attorney Williams, not the woman who had to be strong in the face of every challenge. She leaned back, letting the sunlight caress her cheeks, and in that moment, the world seemed utterly perfect. But the tranquility didn't last. A piercing screech tore through the air, like claws ripping through a dream. Aisha startled, her head snapping up, her heart racing. A police car pulled up, its tires grinding against the asphalt, coming to an abrupt stop less than 20 feet from her at the edge of the curb. Curious eyes from the crowd began to turn toward her, as if she were the center of an unannounced drama. 2 officers stepped out, Daniel Hayes, 42, and Michael Reed, 38, their rigid postures exuding cold authority. Their gazes locked onto Aisha, the only woman sitting alone in their line of sight. Aisha felt a chill run down her spine, despite the sun still shining brightly overhead. She set the book down, her hands trembling slightly, but striving to maintain composure. There was something in the officer's eyes, not concern, but a sharp suspicion, as if they had already judged her guilty before speaking a word. The children's laughter faded into the distance, replaced by a tension that spread through the air. Aisha took a deep breath, telling herself to stay calm, but deep inside, she knew her moment of peace had been stolen, and a storm was brewing. The afternoon breeze in Riverside Park suddenly turned cold, as if carrying the unease from the officer's stares. Aisha Williams, still seated on the wooden bench, fought to steady her racing heartbeat. She placed the novel down, her hands gripping the edges of the book to hide their trembling. Daniel Hayes stepped closer, his polished black shoes halting just a few feet away. Reed stood behind him, arms crossed, his piercing gaze sweeping over her as if she were a threat. "Hey, ma'am," Hayes said, his voice dry and devoid of warmth. "We need to talk." Aisha looked up, her eyes calm but sharp, the way she faced opponents in the courtroom. "All right," she replied, her tone even, though inside, a spark of anger began to smolder. "We got a report about suspicious behavior around here." Reed cut in, his voice stiff, as if reciting a script. "What are you doing here?" Aisha raised an eyebrow, surprise mingling with irritation. "I'm reading," she said, holding up the novel, its cover glinting in the sunlight. But their expressions didn't soften. They only grew more scrutinizing. "Let's see some ID," Hayes ordered, his tone leaving no room for argument. Aisha felt a surge of heat rise in her chest. "Why?" she asked, her voice still controlled but carrying a hint of defiance. "Just procedure," Reed replied, but the way he tilted his head, the way Hayes rested his hand near the holster on his belt, told a different story. A few passers-by began to pause about 30 feet away, whispering among themselves. Aisha noticed them watching her, not with sympathy, but with a mix of curiosity and wariness. Aisha exhaled slowly, trying to suppress the rising anger. "I haven't done anything wrong," she said, her voice clear. "I'm just sitting here in a public park." But Hayes stepped closer, a flicker of irritation in his eyes. "Don't make this complicated," he said, his voice low but laced with menace. ID now. Aisha felt the sting of injustice, like a sharp cut. She knew this all too well. The way they looked at her, the way they assumed she was a problem, not because of her actions, but because of the color of her skin. The familiar pain, though experienced countless times, still pierced her heart. With a sigh, Aisha opened her bag, pulled out her wallet, and handed over her driver's license. Hayes snatched it, reading her name aloud, Aisha Williams, with a mocking tone, as if the name itself were a joke. Reed stood there, his gaze never leaving her, as if waiting for her to slip up. The crowd grew larger, whispers rising, but no one spoke in her defense. Aisha clenched her fists, her nails digging into her palms. She knew that if she didn't stay calm, things would only get worse. The crowd at Riverside Park had now formed a loose circle, about 40 feet from Aisha Williams and the two officers, like spectators at an unexpected outdoor play. Aisha still clutched her driver's license, her eyes darting between Daniel Hayes and Michael Reed, waiting for a reasonable explanation. But instead of answering, Hayes shot her a cold glare. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be," he growled, his tone implying she was a criminal caught red-handed. Reed stepped forward, pulling handcuffs from his belt, the metal glinting in the afternoon sun. "Wait a minute," Aisha said, her voice sharp with disbelief. "What are you doing?" "I'm just sitting here reading." But Hayes didn't bother responding. "You're resisting," he declared, even though Aisha hadn't moved an inch. The crowd murmured, a few people shaking their heads, but no one dared speak up. Suddenly, a teenager in the crowd, standing about 50 feet away, shouted, "She's just reading a book." "What are you guys doing?" Snickers rippled through the group, but Reed's piercing glance silenced them. Aisha felt blood rush to her face, not from shame, but from humiliation strangling her. "Resisting?" she echoed, her voice now tinged with sarcasm. "So sitting in a park reading is a crime now? Should I call my lawyer? Or do you want to keep writing this script?" The crowd stirred again, a mother pushing a stroller nearby, covering her mouth to hide a smile. But Hayes wasn't amused. He grabbed Aisha's arm, yanking her to her feet. "That's enough," he barked, snapping the handcuffs around her wrists, the cold metal biting into her skin. The click of the handcuffs echoed like a verdict. Aisha bit her lip, fighting to stay composed, but the injustice twisted in her chest like a knife. She glanced at the crowd, catching the eyes of a young woman, Sarah Gwynn, 25, who was filming everything on her phone. Aisha gave a slight nod, a silent thank you. As Hayes and Reed led her to the police car, the crowd parted, leaving behind whispers and pitying glances. "Just a book," an old man muttered, shaking his head. Inside the police car, the air was stifling like a prison. Aisha sat in the back, her wrists aching from the tight cuffs. She stared out the window, the golden sunlight of Asheville now just a blurry streak. At the station, the process was even worse. They fingerprinted her, took mugshots as if she were a dangerous criminal, and led her to a small holding cell where the fluorescent light buzzed like a fly. "Get some rest," Reed said, flashing a smirk before slamming the door shut. Aisha sat on the cold bench, her hands clenched. She told herself this wasn't the end, but the beginning of a fight. In the stifling holding cell of the Asheville police station, Aisha Williams, 32, sat on a cold bench, the fluorescent light buzzing like a discordant song. Her wrists still ached from the handcuffs, but her mind was sharper than ever. The image of Sarah Gwynn, the 25-year-old who had raised her phone to record the arrest at Riverside Park, flashed in Aisha's mind like a spark of hope. Aisha didn't know where that video would lead, but she felt the weight of Sarah's gaze, a silent promise that the truth would not be buried. Hours later, Aisha was released on bail. Stepping out of the police station, the cool night air of Asheville brushed against her face like a comforting embrace. Lena Carter, 35, her colleague and close friend, waited at the curb, 20 feet away. "Aisha!" Lena called, rushing over, her eyes filled with worry and anger. "Are you okay?" Aisha nodded, though her hand still trembled slightly. "I'm fine," she said, her voice hoarse. As they got into the car, Lena glanced at her. "What are you going to do next?" Aisha gave a faint smile, her eyes blazing. I'm going to make them pay, Lena. My way. The next morning, Asheville erupted. Sarah's video, posted on social media, spread like wildfire across dry grass. The image of Aisha, calm yet resolute, being handcuffed by Daniel Hayes and Michael Reed, touched the hearts of thousands. But an unexpected twist fueled the story's explosion. A local street artist, Jamal Riff Carter, 21, saw the video and composed a rap right on the corner of Biltmore Avenue, 2 miles from the park. With an old guitar and a voice full of fire, Jamal turned Aisha's story into a song called Books and Cuffs, both satirical and powerful. She's reading a book. They slap on the cuff / where's the justice. Asheville, what's up? He sang, drawing a cheering crowd of hundreds. Jamal's song, recorded and shared, propelled Sarah's video to new heights, racking up millions of views in just 48 hours. Asheville's residents took to the streets, raising banners at Riverside Park, demanding justice. A single mother posted online, "I see myself in Aisha, just wanting peace, but they won't let us have it." A Blue Ridge University student wrote, "She's our superhero." Aisha, sitting at her kitchen table with a cold cup of coffee, read these comments, feeling hot tears well up. She wasn't alone. The community, from strangers like Jamal to Sarah, was standing behind her, turning her humiliation into a fire for justice. But as she closed her laptop, her gaze hardened. "This is just the first step," she whispered, ready for the battle ahead. The dim light in Aisha Williams' Asheville kitchen cast shadows on scattered notepads and a glowing laptop. Aisha sat there, her deep brown eyes glinting with determination, though the clock neared midnight. Sarah Nguyen's video and Jamal Carter's Books and Cuffs rap continued to shake up social media, turning her story into a blaze sweeping through Asheville. The support from community, from the single mother to the Blue Ridge University students, was like a gust of wind fueling her. But Aisha knew words alone weren't enough. She needed action, and she had her sharpest weapon, her legal expertise. After being released on bail, Aisha didn't let herself drown in anger or pain. She stood up, slipped on a comfortable sweater, and turned her kitchen table into a command center. "Lena," she said, calling her friend Lena Carter, her voice steady as steel, "I'm going to sue. Civil rights against Daniel Hayes, Michael Reed, and the entire police department. Are you in?" 5 miles away, Lena, sipping late-night coffee, nearly spilled her mug. "Aisha, you're crazy, but count me in." They laughed, but both knew this fight would be far from easy. Aisha's law office, 3 miles from Riverside Park, became a battlefield of paperwork. She pored over case law, scribbled dense notes on a whiteboard, and drafted the lawsuit with precision of an artist painting a masterpiece. But the atmosphere wasn't all tension. One morning, as Aisha explained the strategy to her team, Tommy, a notoriously clumsy young colleague, knocked over an entire latte onto a stack of documents. "Oh no, Aisha, I'm so sorry," Tommy yelped, throwing his hands up in surrender. Aisha burst into laughter, her first in days. "Tommy, if you ruin this lawsuit, I'll sue you next." The room erupted in laughter, easing the suffocating pressure. This moment of levity didn't distract Aisha. She knew the lawsuit wasn't just for herself, but for others who've been unfairly treated by Daniel Hayes and Michael Reed. Each night, she read emails from the community. An elderly man shared how his grandson was harassed by police. A teenager sent a drawing of Aisha as a superhero. Those words were like a fire warming her through long work hours. "She's our voice," one online comment read, paired with a raised fist emoji. As the lawsuit took shape, Aisha felt the weight of responsibility. She wasn't just confronting 2 officers, but an entire system that enabled abuse of power. Yet every page, every word she wrote, was a hammer striking the wall of injustice. She sipped her coffee, gazing out the window where the moonlight bathed Asheville. "They picked the wrong person to bully," she whispered, gripping her pen tightly, ready for the fight ahead. Aisha Williams' kitchen table in Asheville, North Carolina, was now buried under papers and empty coffee mugs, but a fire of determination in her still burned fiercely. The civil rights lawsuit against Daniel Hayes, Michael Reed, and the police department was taking form, thanks to the support of Lena Carter and their legal team. But what surprised Aisha was the community's strength. ignited by Sarah Nguyen's video and Jamal Carter's books and cuffs rap. The video, capturing Aisha's resilience in the face of injustice, didn't just spread in Asheville. It went far beyond, becoming a symbol of the fight against abuse of power. Within weeks, Aisha's story sparked discussions across North Carolina. At Riverside Park, 3 miles from her home, activist groups gathered, holding signs that read, "Justice for Aisha." Blue Ridge University students hosted forums analyzing systemic racism in policing, with Jamal's rap as a soundtrack. On social media, the hashtag books and cuffs trended, accompanied by thousands of posts sharing experiences of injustice. One user wrote, "Aisha is us, just want to live in peace, but they won't let us." Reading these, Aisha's heart felt both warm and heavy with responsibility. The media attention hit like a storm. Local and national news outlets called relentlessly, seeking interviews. One afternoon, as Aisha left her law office, a young reporter from WNC News, Bobby Klein, clumsily chased after her, 10 feet behind, nearly dropping his microphone. "Ms. Williams, interview, please," Bobby stammered, the mic cord tangling around his legs like a comedy skit. Aisha paused, raising an eyebrow, barely suppressing a laugh. "You okay there, Bobby? Or do I need to sue that microphone, too?" The nearby crowd burst into laughter, and Bobby blushed but pressed on about the lawsuit. Aisha declined politely. "I'll let justice speak in the courtroom, not on TV." Bobby nodded, but still filmed her walking away, her confident stride that of a reluctant star. Though she shunned the spotlight, Aisha couldn't deny its impact. Discussions about abuse of power and racism spread from Asheville's downtown coffee shops to online forums. An elderly woman, 2 miles from the park, sent Aisha a handwritten letter. "You remind me of our fights in the 60s. Don't stop." Those words were like a drumbeat urging her on. Each night, as moonlight streamed through her window, Aisha sat at her laptop, reviewing community emails and refining the lawsuit. She knew her story no longer belonged to her alone. It belonged to everyone standing up, from Sarah and Jamal to strangers, and she vowed not to let them down. The moonlight faded over Asheville, North Carolina, as Aisha Williams closed her laptop, her eyes weary but burning with resolve. Sarah Nguyen's video and Jamal Carter's rap had transformed her into a symbol of resistance against injustice, but Aisha felt a new weight: the community's expectations. Every email, every banner at Riverside Park, 3 miles from her home, reminded her that the civil rights lawsuit against Daniel Hayes, Michael Reed, and the police department wasn't just hers. It was a flag for those who had been trampled, and she couldn't afford to fail. Aisha worked tirelessly, building the case with Lena Carter, crafting a lawsuit as solid as steel. But the pressure wasn't only legal. The community saw her as a torchbearer, and every move she made was scrutinized. One morning, as she sipped coffee in the law office, Lena slid a local newspaper across the table. "You're famous now," Lena teased, pointing to the headline, "Asheville lawyer challenges injustice." Aisha shook her head, giving a wry smile. "Famous? I just want justice." Lena winked. "Well, you're a justice superstar then." They both laughed, a rare moment of lightness amid the suffocating pressure. The turning point came one evening at the Harmony Community Center, 2 miles from downtown Asheville, where Aisha attended a community forum. She stood before a crowd of 200, sharing details of the lawsuit, when a freelance journalist, Greg Tanner, 40, abruptly interrupted. "Ms. Williams, aren't you just using this for fame?" he asked, his tone dripping with sarcasm, microphone raised high. The crowd fell silent, 15 feet from the stage. Aisha felt blood rush to her face, pressure erupting like a volcano. She stepped forward, her eyes sharp as knives. "Using this? I was handcuffed for reading a book, Mr. Tanner. What do you write besides cheap questions?" The crowd erupted in applause, some shouting, "That's right." Greg flushed, stepping back. But Aisha wasn't done. "I'm fighting for those without a voice, and I won't stop for questions like that." The cheers thundered, turning the tense moment into a triumph. The incident, filmed and shared online, amplified Aisha's story. But back home, Sitting alone, she read an email from a teenager describing police harassment. "You're my hope," he wrote. Aisha's heart grew heavy. The community's pressure wasn't just motivation, it was a burden. She couldn't let them down, couldn't let Sarah, Jamal, or the strangers who believed in her feel betrayed. She sipped her tea, gazing out the window where Asheville lay cloaked in darkness. "I'll do this," she whispered, clenching her fists, ready for the challenges ahead. After the forum at Harmony Community Center, Aisha Williams returned to her small Asheville home, carrying both the community's hope and its pressure. The civil rights lawsuit against Daniel Hayes, Michael Reed, and the police department was progressing. But as Aisha prepared for the legal battle, an unexpected twist nearly made her drop her coffee mug. Lena Carter called, her voice brimming with excitement and disbelief. "Aisha, you won't believe this. You've been assigned to preside over a case involving Hayes and Reed." Aisha froze, 5 feet from her kitchen table, feeling the floor shift beneath her. "What?" she asked, her voice slightly unsteady. Lena burst into laughter over the phone. "Yup, those two must be shaking in their boots. You'll be on the bench, watching them squirm." Aisha laughed, though her heart pounded. This wasn't just a coincidence. It was a chance for justice to speak in a way no one expected. But the pressure doubled. She had to remain impartial, despite the memory of cold handcuffs at Riverside Park, 3 miles away. Weeks later, the Buncombe County Courthouse was packed. The case was a hearing on misconduct, alleging Hayes and Reed used excessive force in a separate incident. Aisha entered the courtroom, her black robe flowing, her gaze sharp yet composed. The crowd fell silent, 20 feet from the judge's bench. Hayes and Reed sat at the defendant's table, their police uniforms unable to mask their unease. As Aisha took her seat, Hayes paled, his eyes widening as if he'd seen a ghost. Reed clenched his fists, trying to stay calm, but the sweat beading on his forehead betrayed him. A touch of humor came from their defense attorney, Robert Klein, 55, who fumbled and dropped a stack of documents the moment Aisha struck her gavel. Your Honor," Klein stammered, scrambling to gather the papers as the crowd stifled giggles. Aisha raised an eyebrow, her voice calm but commanding. "Mr. Klein, I hope your arguments are tidier than that paperwork." The courtroom erupted in laughter, but Aisha swiftly restored order. "This court is now in session," she declared, her gaze sweeping over Hayes and Reed, who bowed their heads. This moment was symbolic. Aisha, once humiliated by them, now held their fate in her hands. But she knew her role demanded impartiality. Though the memory of that day in the park still stung, she took a deep breath, gripping the wooden gavel. This wasn't about revenge. It was about justice for her, for the community, and for those who believed in her. As the attorneys began their arguments, Aisha sat poised, ready to face the greatest challenge of her life. The Buncombe County Courthouse in Asheville, North Carolina, was packed as a misconduct hearing against Daniel Hayes and Michael Reed reached its final day. Aisha Williams, 32, sat on the judge's bench, her black robe radiating authority. The memory of being handcuffed by them at Riverside Park, 3 miles away, lingered, but Aisha remained impartial, listening as the prosecutor presented evidence. Hayes and Reed had used excessive force in another incident, causing unwarranted harm. The crowd, 20 feet from the bench, held their breath, still chuckling at the memory of defense attorney Robert Klein, 55, fumbling his papers earlier. Hayes and Reed's testimonies were feeble, evading accountability, reminding Aisha of the injustice she'd endured. But she suppressed her emotions, focusing on the evidence. When delivering the ruling, she stood, her voice resonating. "Police officers are tasked with protecting the community with respect and integrity," she said, her eyes sweeping over Hayes and Reed, who now bowed their heads, shoulders trembling. The defendant's actions undermined public trust. Aisha issued her ruling. Hayes and Reed were suspended without pay, required to undergo extensive retraining, and faced disciplinary action on their records. The defendant's actions not only violated protocol, but eroded the community's trust, she stated firmly. The crowd nodded, sensing the fairness in her words. The ruling wasn't vengeance, but an opportunity for reform, a lesson that power comes with responsibility, and mistakes must be corrected through action, not just apologies. Before leaving, Hayes muttered an apology. Aisha nodded, knowing words alone were enough. As she struck the gavel, declaring, "Court adjourned," a soft wave of applause filled the room. But Aisha's legal journey wasn't over. The civil rights lawsuit she, Lena Carter, 35, and their legal team had prepared against Hayes, Reed, and the police department had gained traction. After the hearing, Aisha received news. The police department agreed to a settlement, committing to internal reforms and compensating for damages, acknowledging the officers' misconduct. Lena called, her voice brimming with excitement. "Aisha, we did it. They can't dodge this anymore." Aisha smiled, relieved but cautious. "This is just the first step, Lena." Before exiting the courtroom, Hayes hesitated, glancing at Aisha. "Your Honor, I'm sorry," he said quietly. Aisha nodded without responding, knowing true change required time and effort. As the gavel struck, declaring, "Court adjourned," the room echoed with soft applause. Aisha lingered, her hand brushing the gavel, feeling both relief and weight. She had delivered justice, not just for herself, but for those who believed in her, from Sarah and Gwen to Jamal Carter and the Asheville community. The outcome of the lawsuit and Aisha's ruling became a profound lesson. Justice demands persistence and accountability from both individuals and systems. As Aisha left courthouse, sunlight bathed her face, a reminder that each victory lays a foundation for change. The ruling and the lawsuit didn't just right a wrong. They paved the way for a fairer future where every voice could be heard. Aisha took a deep breath, ready to continue her journey, carrying the lesson that justice is a flame that must be tirelessly nurtured. Aisha's ruling sparked a catalyst for reform. At the Harmony Community Center, 2 miles from downtown Asheville, activists, police leaders, and residents gathered to discuss transparent policies and officer retraining. Blue Ridge University hosted workshops, with Jamal's books and cuffs wrapped as a rallying symbol. One evening, Evelyn Brooks, 68, clasped Aisha's hand at a community meeting. "You've given us faith," she said, her eyes brimming with tears. Aisha smiled, her heart warmed. "We did this together, Ms. Brooks." The impact rippled beyond Asheville. Nearby cities began reviewing police protocols, using the case as a lesson. On social media, the hashtag books and cuffs continued to inspire, with stories of resilience. Aisha read a post from a teenager. "Ms. Williams taught me we can change the system if we don't give up." This lesson, that justice requires perseverance and unity, sank deep into her. She hadn't fought alone. Sarah, Jamal, Lena Carter, 35, and the entire community had raised a flag of fairness with her. One afternoon, Aisha stood on the courthouse steps, 10 feet from the main entrance, watching a crowd of young people hoist banners demanding equality. Her eyes shone as she thought of the future. The system wasn't perfect, but each step forward proved change was possible. "Justice isn't a destination," she had once told Lena. "It's a path we walk together." That message, full of hope, echoed in the hearts of those who believed in her. As the sunset cloaked Asheville in golden light, Aisha took a deep breath, knowing this journey and the fire of justice would burn on.